Hello, this is a continuance of Longfellow's narrative poem Tales of a Wayside Inn. We now move on to the first story, The Landlord's Tale, which is Paul Revere's Ride. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride to spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm." Then he said, "Good night," and with a muffled oar silently rowed to the Charleston shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset, British man of war, a phantom ship, with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boat on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the old North Church, by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade. By the trembling ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down, a moment on the roofs of the town, and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath, in the churchyard, lay the dead, in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell of the place, and the hour, and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead, for suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then, impetuous, stamped the earth and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But, mostly, he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church, as it rose above the graves of the hill, lonely and spectral and sombre and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hooves in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from pebbles in passing a spark struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land to flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him tranquil and broad and deep is the mystic meeting the ocean tides. And under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Mitford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 o'clock. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows blank and bare gaze at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town, and he heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of the birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. One was safe and asleep in his bed. Who at the bridge would be first to fall? Who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball? You know the rest. In the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So, through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance, not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo for evermore. For, born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. There ends the landlord's tale. The interlude. The landlord ended thus his tale, then rising took down from its nail the sword that hung there dim with dust, and cleaving to its sheath with rust, and said, "This sword was in the fight." The poet seized it and exclaimed, "It is the sword of a good knight. Though homespun was his coat of mail, what matter if it not be named Joyeuse, Collado, Durindale, Excalibur, or Aroundite, or other name the books record? Your ancestor who bore this sword as colonel of the volunteers, mounted upon his old grey mare, seen here and there and everywhere. To me a grander shape appears than old Sir William or what not, clinking about in foreign lands with iron gauntlets on his hands and on his head an iron pot." All laughed. The landlord's face grew red as his escutcheons on the wall. He could not comprehend at all the drift of what the poet said, for those who had been longest dead were always greatest in his eyes, and he was speechless with surprise to see Sir William's plumed head brought to a level with the rest and made the subject of a jest. This perceiving to appease the landlord's wrath, the other's fears, the student said with careless ease, "The ladies, the cavaliers, the arms, the loves, the courtesies, the deeds of high emprise I sing. Thus Ariosto says in words that have the stately stride and ring of armed knights and clashing swords. Now listen to the tale I bring. Listen. Though not to me belong the flowing draperies of this song, the words that rouse, the voice that charms, and the landlord's tale was one of arms. Only a tale of love is mine, a blending the human and divine, a tale of the Decameron told, in Palmiere's garden old, by a Fiammetta laurel crowned, while her companions lay around, and heard the intermingled sound of airs that on their errands sped, and wild birds gossiping overhead, and lisp of leaves and fountains fall, and her own voice more sweet than all, telling the tale which, a wanting these, perchance may lose its power to please. The Student's Tale. The Falcon of Sir Frederico. One summer morning, when the sun was hot, weary with labour in his garden plot, on a rude bench beneath his cottage eaves, Sir Frederico sat among the leaves of a huge vine that, with its arms outspread, hung its delicious clusters overhead. Below him through the lovely valley flowed the river Arno, like a winding road, and from its banks were lifted high in air the spires and roofs of Florence called the Fair. To him a marble tomb that rose above his wasted fortunes and his buried love, for there in banquet and in tournament his wealth had lavished been, his substance spent. To woo and loo, since ill his wooing sped, Monna Giovanna, who his rival wed. Yet, ever in his fancy reigned supreme, the ideal woman of a young man's dream. Then he withdrew in poverty and pain to this small farm, the last of his domain, his only comfort and his only care to prune his vines and plant the fig and pear. His only forester and only guest, his falcon, faithful to him, when the rest whose willing hands had found so light of yore the brazen knocker of his palace door, had now no strength to lift the wooden latch that entrance gave beneath the roof of thatch. Companion of his solitary ways, purveyor of his feasts on holidays, on him this melancholy man bestowed the love with which his nature overflowed. And so, the empty-handed years went round, vacant though voiceful with prophetic sound, and so that summer morn he sat and mused with folded patient hands, as he was used, and dreamily before his half-closed sight floated the vision of his lost delight. Beside him motionless the drowsy bird dreamed of the chase of his slumber herd, the sudden scythe-like sweep of wings that dare the headlong plunge through eddying gulfs of air, then starting broad awake upon his perch, tinkled his bells like mass bells in a church, and looking at his master seemed to say, "Sir Frederico, shall we hunt today?" Sir Frederico thought not of the chase, the tender vision of her lovely face. I will not say he seems to see, he sees in the leaf shadows of the trellises herself, yet not herself. A lovely child with flowing tresses and eyes wide and wild, coming undaunted up the garden walk and looking not at him but at the hawk. "Beautiful falcon," said he, "would that I might hold thee on my wrist or see thee fly." The voice was hers and made strange echoes start through all the haunted chambers of his heart, as an aeolian harp through gusty doors of some old ruin with its music pours. "Who is thy mother, my fairy boy?" he said, his hands laid softly on that shining lid. Monna Giovanna, will you let me stay a little while and with your falcon play? We live there just beyond your garden wall, in the great house behind the poplars tall. So he spake on, and Federico heard, as from afar each softly uttered word, and drifted onward through the golden gleams and shadows of the misty sea of dreams, as mariners becalmed through vapours drift and feel the sea beneath them sink and lift. And hear far off the mournful breakers roar, and voices calling faintly from the shore. Then, waking from his pleasant reveries, he took the little boy upon his knees and told him stories of his gallant bird, till in their friendship he became a third. Monna Giovanna, widowed in her prime, had come with friends to pass the summer-time. In her grand villa halfway up the hill, overlooking Florence, but retired and still, with iron gates that open through long lines of sacred ilex and centennial pines, and terraced gardens and broad steps of stone and sylvan deities with moss overgrown, and fountains palpitating in the heat, and all vowelled honour stretched beneath its feet. Here, in seclusion as a widow may, the lovely lady whiled the hours away, pacing in sable robes the statued halls, herself the stateliest statue among all, and seeing more and more with secret joy her husband risen and living in her boy, till the lost sense of life returned again, not as delight, but as relief from pain. Meanwhile, the boy, rejoicing with strength, stormed down the terraces from length to length. The screaming peacock chased in hot pursuit and climbed the garden trellises for fruit, but his chief pastime was to watch the flight of a gerfalcon soaring into sight, beyond the trees that fringed the garden wall, then downward stooping at some distant call, and as he gazed full often wondered he who might the master of the falcon be. Until that happy morning when he found master and falcon in cottage ground. And now a shadow and a terror fell on the great house, as if a passing bell tolled from the tower and filled each spacious room with secret awe and preternatural gloom, that the petted boy grew ill, and day by day pined with mysterious malady away. The mother's heart would not be comforted, her darling seemed to her already dead, and often sitting by the sufferer's side, "What can I do to comfort thee?" she cried. At first the silent lips made no reply, but moved at length by her importunate cry. "Give me," he answered with imploring tone, "Sir Federico's falcon for my own." No answer could the astonished mother make. How could she ask e'en for a darling's sake such favours as a luckless lover's hand, well knowing that to ask was to command, well knowing what all falconers confessed, in all the lands that falcon was the best, the master's pride and passion and delight, and the sole pursuivant of this poor knight. But yet, for her child's sake, she could no less than give assent. To soothe his restlessness she promised, and then promising to keep her promise sacred, saw him fall asleep. The morrow was a bright September morn. The earth was beautiful, as if newborn. There was that nameless splendour everywhere, that wild exhilaration in the air which makes the passers in the city street congratulate each other as they meet. Two lovely ladies clothed in cloak and hood passed the garden gate into the wood. under the lustrous leaves and through the sheen of dewy sunshine, showering down between. The one close-hooded had the attractive grace which sorrow sometimes lends a woman's face, her dark eyes moistened with the mists that roll from the gulf stream of passion in the soul. The other with a hood thrown back, her hair making a golden glory in the air, her cheeks suffused with an auroral blush, her young heart singing louder than the thrush. So walked that morn through mingled light and shade, each by the other's presence lovelier made. Monna Giovanna and her bosom friend, intent of the errand and its end. They found Sir Federico at his toil, like banished Adam delving in the soil, and when he looked, and these fair women spied, the garden suddenly was glorified. His long-lost Eden was restored again, and the strange river winding through the plain no longer was the Arno to his eyes, but the Euphrates watering paradise. Monna Giovanna raised her stately head, and with fair words of salutation said, "Sir Federico, we come here as friends, hoping in this way to make some poor amends for past unkindness. I who ne'er before would even cross the threshold of your door, I who in happier days such pride maintained, refused your banquets and your gifts disdained. This morning come, myself, invited guest, to put your generous nature to the test, and breakfast with you under your own vine." To which he answered, "Poor desert of mine, not your unkindness call it, for if aught is good in me, of feeling or of thought, from you it comes, and this last grace outweighs all sorrows, all regrets of other days." And after further complimented talk among the asters in the garden walk, he left his guests, and to his cottage turned, and as he entered for a moment yearned for the lost splendours of the days of old, the ruby glass, the silver, and the gold, and felt how piercing is the sting of pride, by want embittered and intensified. He looked about him for some means or way to keep this unexpected holiday, searched every cupboard, and then searched again, summoned the maid, who came, but in vain. "The signor did not hunt today," she said. "There's nothing in the house but wine and bread." Then suddenly the drowsy falcon shook his little bells with that sagacious look, which said as plain as language to the ear, "If anything is wanting, I am here." Yes, everything is wanting, gallant bird. The master sees thee without further word. Like thine own lure he whirled thee about. Ah me, the pomp and flutter of brave falconry, the bells, the jesses, the bright scarlet hood, the flight and pursuit of a hild and wood, all these for evermore are ended now. No longer victim, but the victim now. Then on the board a snow-white cloth he spread, laid on its wooden dish the loaf of bread. Brought purple grapes with autumn sunshine hot, the fragrant peach, the juicy bergamot. Then in the mists of a flask of wine he placed, and with autumnal flowers the banquet graced. Sir Federico, would not these suffice, without thy falcon stuffed with cloves and spice? When all was ready, and the courtly dame with her companion to the cottage came, upon Sir Federico's brain there fell the wild enchantment of a magic spell. The room they entered, mean and low and small, was changed into a sumptuous banquet hall, with fanfares by aerial trumpets blown. The rustic chair she sat on was a throne. He ate celestial food, and a divine flavour was given to his country wine. The poor falcon, fragrant with his spice, a peacock was, or bird of paradise. When the repast was ended, they arose and passed again into the garden close. Then said the lady, "For too well I know, remembering still the days of long ago, though you betray it not, with what surprise you see me here in this familiar wise. You have no children, and you cannot guess what anguish, what unspeakable distress a mother feels whose child is lying ill, and how her heart anticipates his will. And yet for this you see me lay aside all womanly reserve and check of pride, and ask the thing most precious in your sight, your falcon, your sole comfort and delight, which if you find it in your heart to give, my poor unhappy boy perchance may live." Sir Frederico listens and replies with tears of love and pity in his eyes. "Alas, dear lady, there can be no task so sweet to me as giving when you ask. 1 little hour ago, if I had known this wish of yours, it would have been my own. But thinking in what manner I could best do honour to the presence of my guest, I deemed that nothing worthier could be than what most dear and precious was to me. And so my gallant falcon breathed his last, to furnish forth this morning our repast." In mute contrition mingled with dismay, the gentle lady turned her eyes away, grieving that he such sacrifice should make and kill his falcon for a woman's sake. Yet, feeling in her heart a woman's pride that nothing she could ask for was denied, then took her leave and passed out at the gate, with footsteps slow and soul disconsolate. 3 days went by, and lo, a passing bell told the little chapel in the dell. 10 strokes Sir Federico heard, and said, breathing a prayer, "Alas, the child is dead." 3 months went by, and lo, a merrier chime rang from the chapel bells at Christmas time. The cottage was deserted and no more. Sir Federico sat beside its door, but now with servitors to do his will. In the grand villa halfway up the hill, sat at the Christmas feast, and at his side Monna Giovanna, his beloved bride. Never so beautiful, so kind, so fair, enthroned once more in the old rustic chair, high perched upon the back of which there stood the image of a falcon carved in wood, and underneath the inscription with a date, "All things come round to him who will but wait." The interlude. Soon as the story reached its end, one over-eager to commend crowned it with injudicious praise, and then the voice of blame found vent and fanned the embers of dissent into a somewhat lively blaze. The theologian shook his head. "Are these old Italian tales?" he said, "from the much praised Decameron down, through all the rabble of the rest, are either trifling dull or lewd. The gossip of a neighbourhood in some remote provincial town, a scandalous chronicle at best. They seem to me a stagnant fen, grown rank with rushes and with reeds, where a white lily now and then blooms in the midst of noxious weeds, and a deadly nightshade on its banks." To this the student straight replied, "For the white lily, many thanks. One should not say with too much pride, a fountain I will not drink of thee, nor were it grateful to forget that from these reservoirs and tanks even imperial Shakespeare drew his more of Venice and the Jew and Romeo and Juliet and many a famous comedy. Then a long pause, till someone said, "An angel is flying overhead." At these words spake the Spanish Jew, and murmured with an inward breath, "God grant if what ye say be true, it may not be the angel of death." And then another pause, and then, stroking his beard, he said again, "This brings back to my memory a story in the Talmud told, of books of gems, that book of gold, of wonders many and manifold. A tale that often comes to me and fills my heart and haunts my brain and never wearies nor grows old." But the Spanish Jew's tale will have to wait for tomorrow.